Il a sûrement des égotistes en main. Il va 7 une carte. Attends,
Non,
si c'est une carte, je comprends pas.
C'est une belle carte. Il est en train de la regarder là. Voilà.
Et la harpie ici qui est placée.
Je laisse le spécialiste harpie nous parler.
What
Celle-ci,
the?
quand tu l'as normal.
What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you an updated meta-analysis for the June 2019 format. The WCQ season is in full swing, and we actually had our first set of WCQs this past weekend, in addition to a crazy amount of nationals, some of which had record-breaking attendance, and so we're going to be covering all of these events in one single video, so you are definitely not going to want to miss out. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So we have a lot to cover, so I apologize in advance if you see me looking off to the screen just to make sure I have all the information correct, but I want to go ahead and start off with the UK National. Now this had, I believe, over 800 participants. Not like record-breaking, I think they've definitely had larger ones, but it's still an incredibly large number and just going to show how popular the game currently is. So here is the top 64 breakdown of that UK Nationals. As you can see, Salamangreat continues to just dominate the field. Salamangreat, I believe, had the highest representation, not only in this top 64, but I believe in the entire field of the tournament as well, followed by Orcust, which conveniently enough also happened to have the second highest representation here as well. So for the total breakdown, there were 24 Salamangreat decks, we had 12 Orcust, 9 Thunder Dragon, 8 Endymion Pendulum, which we're going to go ahead and cover here in a little bit. Then we also had 7 Sky Striker, and then we had a couple rogue decks in there as well. We had a Cyber Dragon, an Altergeist, a Trickstar, as well as a Subterror. Now do keep in mind there's a little bit of a discrepancy here because during the top 64 feature match, we actually did see a Mech Knight Invoke deck play, and it actually convincingly 2-0'd. So there's a Mech Knight Invoke deck somewhere on this list, so I'm not sure what deck has one less in terms of representation, so do keep that in mind. There is just that slight discrepancy. However, for the most part, this just pretty much solidifies what we were seeing previously, but it helps further solidify Salamangreat's position as the most represented deck of the entire format as of now. I mean, it doesn't matter that Salamangreat may not be winning because, funny enough, Sky Striker actually happened to take the event, but Salamangreat did get second place. But the thing you have to bear in mind here is, it seems that Salamangreat is the most popular strategy going into these high tier level events. So if you're going into the events, not only do you have to prepare for the other big decks like Sky Striker, like Orcust, like Thunder, but Salamangreat, statistically anyway, is the deck you should expect to face the most. And especially when you get to the top tables, or if you make it to the top cut as well, that's going to hold true even more, and those statistics are going to become even more valid, meaning you definitely have to prepare for that Salamangreat matchup. Orcust did get a very solid second place in terms of representation, however, it did not manage to win or get second place, but it doesn't take away from the fact that Orcust is still incredibly strong. There's so many different ways you can build the Orcust strategy, which I think is what's so cool about it, and it seems that depending on the direction that the meta is shifting, players are starting to tailor the engines that they're using to accommodate the deck appropriately. So do keep that in mind, especially if you are an Orcust player yourself. You definitely want to make sure that you are up to date on which engines are better against which particular matchups in that deck building process. Thunder Dragon is also something to mention because it still is managing to do quite well. Again, it didn't exactly win this event, but we're going to go ahead and talk about Thunder Dragon a little bit later on. Sky Striker, like I said, did manage to win, and it's crazy that even though Sky Striker does not have like the highest representation, it has like the best conversion rate out of any deck, meaning that even though its numbers aren't exactly the highest in terms of overall players competing with the deck, it seems to just have the best percentage of players that manage to make it to the top cut, and the best percentage of times it manages to win events as well. So again, you have to take all 4 of these decks into account. What's really interesting here is that Endymion Pendulum was having such high representation. I mean, 8 out of the top 64, that's a 12.5% representation, and Pendulum, again, this isn't really new that we expected Pendulum to come out of nowhere, but I think it's a shock to have 8 in the top 64. Now again, it is a national, so it's kind of like a giant regional, but that doesn't take away from the fact that there's still some very high skilled players competing here, but it's just a little bit more roguish than you might expect of something like a YCS or a WCQ. But this is something that, you know, maybe seeing moving forward, we're going to start to see a lot more Pendulum Magician or Endymion Pendulum start to take hold? I'm not really sure, but again, it's something you have to have on your radar in terms of the rogue category, as if your deck is prepared for going up against Pendulum or any Endymion variant. And just to quickly touch on rogue, there was the Cyber Dragon, the Altergeist, the Trickstar, and the Subterror, not to mention the Mech Knight Invoked, which you guys haven't seen the feature match. I would highly recommend checking it out because it was just a brilliant display of what that deck is capable of doing. Nothing here is really too surprising. These are decks that we've seen do well and just make a top here or there in the past. So again, they're kind of just like on the rogue deck category that it might be something you encounter, but don't expect to encounter many of them just because the representation is so much lower in comparison to the top 4 decks. Now, next up is the Australian National, which I didn't have a number for how many players were competing. However, the top 32 breakdown looks something like this. And what's really cool is that Orcust actually managed to have the highest representation here, followed by Salamangreat at 8 slots. Then we had Thunder Dragon, and then there's just a bunch of one-ups. I mean, there was a Madolche, which was really surprising. There was a Mech Knight, there was a Lunalite, there was an Infernoid, and there was an Altergeist. So again, a little bit more rogue in here, and the fact that Orcust actually managed to have the highest representation overall is a little bit of a shift compared to the UK National. Now, Orcust did manage to make it all the way to the finals, but it did lose to Danger Thunder Dragon. So Thunder Dragon is still doing well, even though a lot of people are kind of skeptical just because of the fact that, you know, it hadn't been doing well all the way up to this point, but maybe people now have figured out that it's really strong in the current format. Again, these are all things you have to consider in an ever-changing metagame when it comes to going to your respective WCQ or National, depending on what you have coming up. Now, next up is the France National, and this was quite a sight to behold because this event had over 1,100 players. Like, that's just a testament to how much people are loving Yu-Gi-Oh right now, because we're still breaking attendance records even to this very day. I would have loved to attend that tournament just to witness that. However, I didn't have a lot of information on this because there wasn't a lot out there. I have a couple sources that I was able to get some information from. I do know that the finals was between Salamangreat and Sky Striker. This time Salamangreat managed to take first place, but I don't really have like a top breakdown or anything because the information was so scarce. However, the one thing I was also able to find was that there was a Harpy, yes, Harpy Lady deck that managed to make the top cut. I am dead fucking serious, and this is just incredible. I mean, it was playing like Phantasmes, it was playing evenly matched. Like, I am just astounded that in an 1,100 person event in this specific metagame that Harpies were able to top. Like, that is just absolutely incredible. I am doing everything I can to try to find you guys that deck profile because I know you guys would love to see it. I don't know if there's any validity to it, but the fact that it managed to make the top cut is absolutely amazing. So stay tuned for that and give me some of your energy so I can do my best to find it. Again, you just had your typical assortment of decks. There is a live stream to the top cut from this event, so you can witness all the matches for yourself. It is in French, but if you want to check it out, I'll have a link down in the description for you guys. So that's going to do it for the Nationals, but there was not only one, but 2 WCQs taking place this past weekend. We had the Central American WCQ as well as the Oceanic WCQ as well. Now, kicking things off with the Central American WCQ, here is the top 64 breakdown from that event. And again, we see here that Salamangreat has a very high representation. But when I look at this pie chart, this is what I kind of expect the meta to look like going into the WCQs. We have Salamangreat taking up the most representation, followed not too far behind by Orcust, but then we also have Sky Striker really up there as well, and then Danger Thunder, while still having some representation, not taking up too much. I mean, if you look at my top 5 meta decks of the format, this pretty much almost replicates exactly what I was expecting. And then you also have a few rogue contenders in there as well. We have stuff like Dark Danger, whatever that means. Maybe there's some sort of like Turbo Danger deck. You also have stuff like Altergeist, again showing its head. We have Infernoid hanging in there as well. We also have a Subterror, and the first time we've seen Draco out of all the other breakdowns of this entire video. So very interesting to see what the rogue rogue contenders are, but again, this kind of just reiterates the fact that we are in a 4-deck format, and then you have all these other, you know, few rogue decks that are kind of vying for a spot in the top, but for the most part, this is how I expect to see the trend moving forward. But we did also have the Oceanic WCQ. Now, the player count for this WCQ was rather low. I don't think this is really too much of a surprise. I think the player count for this event is traditionally rather low, but again, it is a WCQ, so you're gonna have a higher ceiling, a lot more meta decks, and here is the breakdown for that event. So here, once again, a highest represented deck was Salamangreat, coming in at 7 of the top 16. There's also 3 Thunder Dragon bringing up the rear, so not too far behind there. But then there was also 3 Altergeist, which was interesting. Now remember, Altergeist did just win the German National as well, and we kind of seen that when you look at all the other meta results from this past weekend, Altergeist is kind of hanging in there as a very favorable rogue contender. I've mentioned Altergeist in several of these other breakdowns in this video, so again, just something to keep in mind that Altergeist is on a little bit of an uptick. What's really interesting for me here is that when you look at the other one of decks, there was 1 Orcust, 1 Sky Striker, and 1 Cyber Dragon, and Salamangreat was both not only the winner, but also the second place runner-up. Again, just furthering the point that Salamangreat is very, very strong in this format, but I find it interesting that only 1 Striker and 1 Orcust managed to make that top 16. Again, the information is not very much available, but they did have a live stream, so if you want to check out those matches, I'll have a link to that in the description as well. Overall, though, I definitely think we're starting to see the format start to solidify a little bit in terms of what the 4 best decks are and what the rogue contenders are starting to be, but at the same time, the format is by no means solved. I mean, just because Salamangreat's starting to pull ahead a little bit in terms of representation and in terms of overall success doesn't mean that it's necessarily the best deck. I mean, there's still the opportunity that people can capitalize on that fact and basically deck build around it, and then they can take advantage and win their respective national or WCQ. It's really hard to say right now, but for sure, you can definitely expect a lot more coverage in the coming weeks because anything can happen. I mean, if fucking Harpies can top the French national, I think this format is capable of absolutely anything. So guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this meta analysis. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video helpful, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member, because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.